Hey everybody, welcome to Rush Reality. My name is Sam. Thank you so much for joining me. For the past 4 years, every time we've entered a new year, I've put together my wrap-up of VR games I enjoyed playing most the year before, and I've announced my VR Game of the Year. That list includes titles such as Half-Life Alyx, Demio, and Boneworks. Today, we're going to add another title to that list. Now, it's been an interesting year. I have to say, last year, I found putting this list together a little bit challenging because there just wasn't very many games to get excited about. But it feels like we've turned a corner in 2023. What a year! We saw the PSVR 2 get released alongside some pretty exciting games. Then things went a little bit quiet for Sony, and we saw the odd trickle of games coming out here and there that didn't really seem to shake things up. Meta, on the other hand, had a slow start to the year, saw a bit of traction going away to PlayStation, but closed out with some genuinely phenomenal games. It's still been quite quiet for PCVR games, but there have been some standout choices. Here we're going to look at all different platforms to see what stands out as the best. We're going to kick off with the title I've put in 5th place, which for me was Gran Turismo 7 on PSVR 2. Now, I've been a fan of Gran Turismo games for a long time, and when they announced that there would be a VR version of Gran Turismo 7 coming out, I thought it would be exactly that, a VR version, an afterthought, something that they'd thrown in to make the headset seem a little bit more compelling by having some release games coming alongside the launch of the headset. But it didn't play out like that. When it came through, Gran Turismo 7 was a fully fledged VR experience, and it was an absolutely fantastic one. They really looked at all the details to make it an awesome VR experience. The way they designed the interior of every car to look completely realistic is just amazing. I love jumping into old retro cars and seeing that kind of mahogany dashboard, everything exactly as you want it to look, and then switching out into a fast modern car and seeing all those tech upgrades. Everything is exactly what it would be like if you were sat in the car yourself. Whether you're playing with a wheel and pedals like I've got on my sim rig, or you're playing with a controller, the experience is absolutely fantastic. Now, I do a lot of sim racing, and I might be judged by other sim racers by saying how much I enjoy playing Gran Turismo, but for me it's just a different kind of experience. I love a really good arcade racer, and Gran Turismo just hits every mark that I need it to. The enormous roster of cars, the sense of speed and adrenaline when you get behind the wheel, combined with the simple but dynamic controls in this kind of game just make it so exciting to play. I'm telling you, if you haven't put on a headset to try out GT7, then you absolutely have to. So that brings me to the game I'm putting in 4th place for 2023. Now, this is a game that might not have made many people's list, but definitely deserves a place on mine. I'm talking about Vertigo 2. Now, Vertigo 2 is the follow-up to one of my favourite VR games, Vertigo Remastered. Vertigo Remastered was one of the PCVR titles that really stood out when I first picked up a VR headset. It was a quirky game with unusual visuals and a fun mix of gameplay. Vertigo 2 brings us more of the same. Vertigo 2 emerges as a shining example of the kind of amazing things that can be achieved by indie developers in the VR realm. It's got everything I wanted from the first game. It doesn't necessarily step things up too much. The visuals are all on the same kind of level, but that's what I wanted. I wanted to step back into that experience. And that's exactly what I've got. You've got the same quirky characters, the same weird atmospheric scenes, the weird weaponry, and the interesting and complex combat. Narratively, Vertigo 2 is a sci-fi game, but it's got that real sense of fun running throughout the game. The creator has a great sense of humour, and he applies that constantly throughout the experience. The enemies are weird and wonderful. They come at you in swarms. Some of the gunfights are really easy, and some are a bit more complex, and you need to apply some strategy to get through. I love the upgrades that you can get to your guns that can really change the experience, and I think it achieves a really good balance between storytelling and gameplay. Despite being an indie title, it doesn't lack in ambition, and some of the level design is genuinely impressive. My vote might be swayed by nostalgia for Vertigo Remastered, but for me, Vertigo 2 is a very worthy contender and deserves its place at number 4 this year. So that brings me to number 3, and the title taking bronze on the podium this year. That to me is another PSVR 2 game and another PSVR 2 launch title. I'm talking Horizon Call of the Mountain. Now, I absolutely loved this game. It's not the longest and it's not got the most depth, but the visuals were absolutely fantastic. It was so well developed, so smooth, and it showcased what the PSVR could really do. I love the integration of eye tracking to help you aim with your bow and arrow. It really makes you feel like a superhero as you're out there picking out those shots like Hawkeye. The climbing and the platforming was very linear. You could even describe it as an on-rails experience, but I just really enjoyed it. I even loved the kind of time trials that they throw into the game, and I found myself getting genuinely competitive as I went back to play them again and again. The same with the combat. It only had a few layers to it for me, and I was mainly firing off bow and arrow shots, but I just always enjoyed myself. I loved the bright, vibrant colours of the jungle. They looked so good on the panels inside the PSVR 2. I did enjoy the story. I'm sure I would have rather jumped into a fully fledged Horizon story with the characters that we know from the main series of games, but by the end of my experience I was happy with what I got from Call of the Mountain. For me it was all about the spectacle. When you came out against these giant machines that were towering above you and you were either scaling them or fighting them, it just felt so exciting. I genuinely loved every minute of it. If you've picked up a PSVR 2 and haven't experienced this yet, maybe because you've heard it's not such a long game, then stop wasting your time and jump in. That brings me to the second place game this year, and actually the first entry for Meta on our list this year. In the last couple of months of 2023, Meta had a real flurry of standalone games that were all pretty good. And one of the standouts for me was Assassin's Creed Nexus. When Assassin's Creed was announced, I went in with very low expectations. We've seen it before. These big developers announce a VR game, we get our hopes up, and then it lands. They're short little tech demo experiences that aren't given the same care and attention as they would to one of their main titles. Now, much to my surprise, that was not what happened at all to Assassin's Creed Nexus. This game was genuinely fantastic. Here we have a 20-hour campaign that takes us through a number of different stories across different timelines, all with amazing environments. The parkour and the combat that you get from classic Assassin's Creed titles are slightly dumbed down, but it's all there. And I just love jumping from building to building and seeing the sights flying by around me. I think they achieved a really good balance. Everything feels slightly more simple than it would in a true Assassin's Creed game, but I think that works really well for VR. If they'd gone a bit more detailed and made you follow the same intricacies as what we've seen in their other games, then I think it would have been too difficult to play and it would have been very frustrating. Things like the stealth when you're hiding from the enemies is just much easier in this game, and I don't think that's a bad thing. It means you can have a bit of fun while you play. You can creep right up behind people, just slightly staying outside of their eye line. They usually don't notice, and you can kill them in a number of interesting ways. I enjoy the combat. There's lots of intense swordplay and some throwable weapons, and it's quite well done. I think it's really hard to nail that kind of sword fighting experience. Lots of games have tried, but because you don't feel any real impact when you swing that weapon, it never really feels like it's happening. Which is why I think this focus on simplicity rather than the detail works really, really well. The overall visuals are fantastic for this game. They really are getting to the point where the optimised Quest 3 standalone experiences are starting to rival some of the experiences you might get on a PC or a PlayStation. It will never match the output from a big bulky graphics card, but I think they work very well within their limitations to deliver a visually impressive game. So I really enjoyed this game, and I do hope it's followed by a number of other franchises making that same step into the VR world. Now, before we get to my VR game of the year, I just want to give a few special mentions for games that I had great fun playing, but maybe didn't have the kind of depth you'd need to make this list. Now, first up was a game called Synapse on PSVR 2. I really enjoyed Synapse as one of those games that you can quickly jump into for a short experience and then jump out again. Something when you don't want to dedicate hours to a gaming session, but just want that quick bit of fun. Now, I genuinely love this game. Synapse is a roguelite where you repeat the same kind of runs through maps that you start to learn, and you earn collectibles and loot so you can go back next time stronger, ready to get further into the game. It was a cerebral and visually striking experience, and I thought the gunplay was absolutely fantastic. They also threw in some kind of force powers, so you almost feel like a Jedi as you're throwing people around the map. It was so much fun. I found myself doing that far more than relying on my gun in a serious gunfight. There was a fairly good narrative to it, but the game was just a bit too short. They do try to give you reasons to start again after you finish the playthrough, but it just wasn't enough for me. I really would like some sort of DLCs or some new maps to really give me reasons to return to that game because I did have so much fun. I would love to see a Synapse 2 where they take things just a little bit further. Next up, we've got another meta standalone game that I played on the Quest 3 and I genuinely considered putting on the main list. I'm talking Vampire the Masquerade Justice. Now, this title easily could have made my list. I did have a lot of fun when I played it, but it just felt like it was slightly too simple when put up against the rest of the titles on this list. This game came at a fantastic time. Those last couple of months of the year just threw so many amazing games at us. And in fact, I would have loved more time to get stuck into Vampire the Masquerade. Here we've got a decent story and some really exciting gameplay that is different from what you might see on most other games. It lets you play your own way, whether you want to play stealthily or go in for the kill, and I love this kind of vampire setting. You've got some special powers that help you move around the map in interesting ways, and the detailed environments did look fantastic on the Quest 3. I would like the map to be a bit more interactive and to be able to pick up things and open more things as I moved around. It did feel like it was slightly lacking when it came to that, but it was a fun experience, and again, I'd like to see this franchise do a bit more in VR. And lastly, I've got two games that very much deserve a place on the VR Games of the Year for 2023, and I would expect to feature on most people's lists. But they just weren't perfect for me, or they came at slightly the wrong time. But they are both absolutely fantastic experiences, and if you've not checked them out, then you have to. I'm talking Resident Evil Village and Resident Evil 4 for the PSVR 2. Starting off with Resident Evil Village, what a game. The visuals are amazing. The setting is so eerie and so scary, it genuinely had me stressed out way too much when playing it, and that is why I didn't invest enough time in it. I just couldn't deal with the heart palpitations. The combat is genuinely hard. It is a challenge to survive. If you enjoy survival horror, then this is a game you've got to play. And if you get stressed out by those kind of things, then maybe this might not be for you. The VR implementation is a technical achievement. This really isn't a game that they've just thrown a bit of VR on top of and let you go away and play. They've really thought this through and delivered a fantastic experience. Very similar to the experience I got in Resident Evil 4 for PSVR 2. Now this is definitely the best version of Resident Evil 4. The game looks genuinely amazing. They've taken it a step further than what we saw when the Quest 2 version got released, and things just look so crisp. Again, the VR interactions are so well thought out, and it is a really enjoyable experience. If I hadn't already invested so much time into playing the game through on Quest 2 and again on PC in a flat version, I probably would have enjoyed this game a bit more. I just didn't want to repeat the same actions again and again and again. That said, Resident Evil 4 is probably my favourite Resident Evil game. I like the kind of over-the-top direction that they take the series in with this game. I would like to return to this game again one day, and when I do, I'll pick it back up in my PlayStation library and I'll finish it on the PSVR 2. So that brings me to the game of the year, the game that stood out from all the competition to deliver the best experience I had in 2023. And for me, that was quite an easy choice because one game absolutely blew away all my expectations. I'm talking Asgard's Wrath 2 for the Meta Quest 3. Now this absolutely blew me away. When I heard that they'd be giving away a free copy of Asgard's Wrath 2 with the Quest 3, I thought fantastic. I'd really enjoyed the first Asgard's Wrath. It was one of the games that really stood out on the Oculus PC store. And it was of course going to take a pretty big hit when it went standalone. But once again, they did such an amazing job of working within their limitations to deliver an amazing experience. Here they've kind of done a Nintendo, showing us that you don't need the kind of incredible graphics you get on a PC, a PlayStation or an Xbox to have great fun playing a game. The graphics are the best I've seen on a standalone headset, and the gameplay is just amazing. The story is detailed, it's got all the RPG elements, the map is massive, and it's just so much fun to get out and experience it. Here we return to the world of Norse mythology. You get to jump between playing as a god and a mortal. As a god, you're able to manipulate your environment and work with animals to aid your mortal, and as a mortal, you get stuck into the combat, the exploration and the platforming. The game is so long, we're talking 100+ hours. A completionist run of this game would be very tough, and something I'm not sure I've quite got the mettle for. I was blown away by the storytelling and the voice acting. By now, we all know a little bit about Norse mythology, and I think they've taken quite a few hints from games like God of War that have already jumped into that world, and they've kind of pulled a few of those ideas into this game. You do feel a bit like Kratos as you're throwing your weapons around and then calling them back. I love the fact that they also built a kind of roguelike experience into the game, where you jump into these little challenges and progress through stages trying to take on many different enemies and unusual stages. It is fun, and it's something I jump into almost every time I play. I think this sets a new standard for what can be achieved on a standalone headset, and people are going to have to up their game to deliver something anywhere near to the kind of standard we've seen with this title. So there you have it. That is my VR Game of the Year for 2023, and I'm looking forward to the rest of 2024 with lots of excitement, because it feels like we've turned a corner and some really cool stuff is on the way. But how about you? What did you enjoy playing last year, and what was your standout game? I'd love to know in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this video, then a like would be appreciated, and a sub to the channel would be amazing. I'd love to see you next time. Thank you very much. Goodbye.